Now, the South African government has filed a case of genocide against Israel at the International Court of Justice over the ongoing war in Gaza, a war with Hamas. The unrest has been ongoing for the past 3 months, which matched global condemnation. So far, more than 21,000 people have lost their lives in the war. Now, in an application to the court in The Hague, South Africa has described the war as a genocidal in character. To unpack this further, we're joined by international relations expert Brooks Spector. A very good morning to you. Happy 2024. South Africa has taken its firmest stance yet against Israel's war in Gaza. In the 84-page application to the court, South Africa describes Israel's actions in Gaza as genocidal in character because they are intending now to bring about the destruction of a substantial part of the Palestinian national, racial and ethnical group. How significant is this move by South Africa?
Well, good morning and Happy New Year and 2024 and best wishes and all that. But to return to your topic, which is quite serious one, the move is, by my reading of it, performative rather than substantive. What I mean by this is that there is no specific way that South Africa can force change, and there is in fact no way, and certainly no immediate way, that the International Court of Justice can achieve change simply by virtue of saying yes to the petition and the petitioner in this matter, because it does not, after all, the International Court of Justice does not have an international police force, an army, a navy, or an air force. What it does instead is rely upon the individual nations involved to do something, or for other nations to stop it from doing something. So in that sense, it's symbolic rather than substantive. There's no question that the Israeli attack on Gaza in retribution for the earlier October 7 attacks by Hamas on Israeli towns and individuals and the taking of hostages, that there's as brutal as that was, there's no gainsaying the fact that the Israeli retribution has been harsh and difficult and has taken many, many lives. But the problem comes in calling it genocidal in character, because genocide has a particular international legal meaning. It does not mean to carry out harsh and punitive, even terrible military acts. It means the deliberate effort, the deliberate organized effort to eliminate, to exterminate a nation or an ethnic group. And that doesn't appear to be the Israeli intent at all. The Israeli intent is to punish Hamas, and if in the process many people who live in Gaza are maimed or wounded, and if structures are destroyed, that's just, too bad from the Israeli point of view in their pursuit of Hamas. And so what I draw from this is that the filing of the petition by the petitioner, in this case South Africa, to the International Court of Justice becomes symbolic rather than, as I said earlier, substantive.
Yeah. With the president and several government officials having compared Israel's policies in Gaza and the occupied West Bank with South Africa's past apartheid regime of racial segregation imposed by the white minority rule that ended in 1994, you say that it's more symbolic rather than significant. What does South Africa's voice in this matter now reflect?
Well, the voice reflects, I think, a profound and honest feeling on the part of many South Africans that the Israeli actions are too harsh, too extreme, and too terrible. And I don't think that's a unique view for South Africans. There are Israelis, obviously, who feel the same way, and many of them. But the fact remains that it is a military campaign rather than an ongoing civil structure and process. Apartheid was quite clearly a horrific way of managing a government, a country, and a people. But what we always have to make sure we make distinctions in things, and that life in Israel proper, is not an apartheid state. The circumstances on the West Bank have a very different character. That's an occupied territory, and Arabs, Palestinians who live in the West Bank do suffer grievously. The circumstances in Gaza are more difficult still, of course, because it's an active war zone. It's an active site for fighting, and there is great violence and destruction. But that's different, yet again, from the ongoing systematic nature of the earlier apartheid era in South Africa. I guess what I'm really arguing is that the South Africans have not done themselves a favor by taking a position from which there really is there is no sort of stepping back, and at the same time a position that has no practical consequences. And I'm not entirely sure why they chose to do this in this fashion at this time. There are some cynics who will argue, and I don't know that it's true, but I mean it's an argument that I've heard advanced, that the South African government, the government that is now an ANC government, is doing this in an effort to gain political advantage in domestic political terms. I'm not entirely sure how that would work, but that's an argument I've heard as well.
Yeah, in fact, my next question was about the impact or foresight by South Africa on its domestic and foreign interests and how all of this comes into the mix.
Yeah, well, I mean, we were thinking alike then. That there, as I said, there are some people who are prepared to argue that this decision was meant to have a discernible domestic political effect, in which the current South African government and its governing party are saying, "See, we have taken the steps to show you, the population, and you, the world, the earnestness of our position and our beliefs." But it doesn't do South Africa any good vis-a-vis, say, the United States or Western Europe. And at the same time, and I'll just toss this out there, the South African government, by virtue of this petition, did not simultaneously condemn the horrific violence and extermination of people in two different versions of things in Sudan, one against the people in Darfur and the other in the civil war between the two factions. It didn't take a stand, by this petition at least, against Russian aggression against Ukraine. And the irony came to my mind when video was showing the destruction of a maternity hospital in Ukraine at the same time the South African government was submitting its petition to the International Court of Justice. In short, international politics is complicated, and when you take stands like this, you have to think through both its strategic implications as well as its practical ones.
Yeah. As we try and, get some sort of ideas on why South Africa may have made this move, when it comes to South Africa asserting its legitimacy, Brooks, in the international system and the perceptions which may come with it, do you think perhaps that there's a perception that South Africa has fallen in its structure and stature on the international stage? That's if we consider South Africa's refusal to arrest Sudanese dictator Omar al-Bashir in 2015. And as a result, as a show of force, holding Israel to account on the international stage may perhaps redeem South Africa.
Well, I don't know that it's going to redeem it, because, as we all know, South Africa and Russia remain closely aligned. And South Africa, as far as I can determine, has evinced no particular policy currently about finding a pathway to peace in Sudan, let alone in any of the other conflicts on the continent, the ones in some of the other nations in the Sahel region, or, in fact, a little closer to home in the eastern Congo with the guerrilla group, terror group M23, as it does terrible things in the eastern Congo. That would have, I think, had the South African government listed all of those, had it listed Russian actions in Ukraine, might have given more of the quote-unquote redemptive quality to South African foreign policy, but it chose a different path.
Mm-hmm. How much pressure would you say has been placed on South Africa over the last couple of years to deal with individuals accused of war crimes, but who are clearly not on the western side of the international political divide?
Well, I mean, the efforts to gain international censure or worse of some people in some rulers, some governing authorities in some countries, Sudan, for an obvious example, but Russia as well. The South Africans have taken South African government, has taken a position that seems to be contrary to a broader international view. But I think what's happening now is that the government is responding to the international imagery of what happens in Gaza every bit as much as it's responding to the actuality of what's happening. I mean, quite clearly, if you turn on your television or open your video feed or do any of these things, and you look at what's taking place right now in areas in Gaza, I mean, you can't help but be horrified. But that's different than saying that is uniquely terrible and that is the only place in which difficult things are taking place. And I for example, the tiny state of the Gambia in West Africa took Myanmar to task at a filing to the International Court of Justice earlier over its government's behavior against its citizens, as well as the more traditional, quote-unquote, tribal areas in the hill country, in the mountains of northern and northeastern Myanmar. Now, I don't know that the Gambian petition to the ICJ has had any discernible effect on Myanmar's behavior either.
Very well. Thank you so much. Let's perhaps leave it there for now. Brooks Spector there giving us a sense of this complexity, South Africa's case against Israel, and giving us some clarity on what we need to understand. Still to come, nursing union DENOSA wants government to intervene as attacks on nurses escalate. We'll bring you details on that story and more.